Eddie, good to see you. If you want to do a quick mic check whenever you're ready.
Mic check, mic check. 1, 2, 3.
Sounding good.
All
How's your day
right.
going?
It's going well for a Thursday.
Fantastic. Well, we're excited to have you back. Thanks so much. Looking forward to a great discussion here to close everything out.
You bet.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to Relationships for Readiness, the 2019 Military Families Learning Network's virtual conference. We're just about to wrap up with our last session, our Making Connections session with Eddie Menser. We're going to be discussing the whole conference, not just what we heard today, but everything that we heard throughout the conference and how it relates to the family readiness system. And we're really interested in hearing what you're thinking about as well. So once again, a reminder of how to access the chat in the Zoom meeting window. Just mouse over the bottom of your Zoom window and you can go ahead and click the chat icon. That'll pop open the chat window. Type your message where it says type message here. And right above that, you're going to see a gray bar. You're going to want that gray bar to show all panelists and attendees, all panelists and attendees. If it doesn't show that, go ahead and click the gray bar and select all panelists and attendees. That way everyone can see your question or comment. I'm super anxious to see what you are thinking about, how you're connecting this conference back to your work and to the family readiness system. We are going to be with Eddie Menser here to talk about that in a little more than 5 minutes. Stay tuned as we near the end of Relationships for Readiness, the Military Families Learning Network virtual conference. Hi, everyone, and welcome back to Relationships for Readiness, the 2019 Military Families Learning Networks virtual conference. We've had such an awesome 3 days together, and it continues in just a moment as we'll talk with Eddie Menser in our Making Connections session and wrap up the 2019 conference. A couple of reminders before we do. We really would love to have your input in this Making Connections session. What connections are you making between all the sessions in the virtual conference and to your work and the family readiness system? So share those comments and questions with us using the chat pod. You can access the chat pod by mousing over the bottom of your Zoom window, clicking the chat pod icon. That'll open the chat window. Type your message where it says type message here, and right above that, just make sure that your message is going to all panelists and attendees. If it's not, click the gray box there and select all panelists and attendees. Another reminder, I think, do we have a idea catcher slide? I'd love to throw that up one more time because it's such an awesome resource. The idea catcher journal's out there for you to use to capture your conference experience. I know your conference experience is coming to an end right now, but if you missed any of the sessions, they're going to be available as recordings on the conference website. So as you access them, you might want to have your idea catcher journal handy to capture your thoughts as you watch recorded sessions as well. So you can find that on the conference website, militaryfamilieslearningnetwork.org/VC2019. You can find the idea catcher journal there. When you do use that, we invite you to snap a picture of your doodles and tweet them at MilFamLN using the hashtag MFLN. VC. Continue to do that, even if you're watching the recordings and you're doing that in the future. And as you continue to think about these things, and maybe you go back to your journal and you refine some of your doodles and make them more into an info doodle, as Sunny called it, we'd love to see you capture those images and tweet them out to at MilFamLN, hashtag MFLNVC. So, are we ready to start making some connections? I definitely have been making connections throughout the last 3 days. I hope you have as well. And here to help us make our connections today, as he's been all 3 days, is an associate director in the Department of Defense Office of Military Family Readiness Policy, Eddie Menser. Welcome back, Eddie.
Hey, Bob, how are you?
I'm good. It's my head is full.
Yeah, no doubt. It has been a amazing 3 days. It's been so great to see so much interaction. I think this concept of relationship for readiness, obviously resonated with people as we've been able to see this move through its various iterations over the last couple of days.
Yeah, it's really been an amazing time. Were there certain things that you're sort of taking away from this in terms of the family readiness system, either maybe how you view it or how you view everyone's role within it?
Yeah, for me, it's that idea of scaffolding and how each one of the sessions has really built on the previous sessions. I love how many of the presenters were able to weave in aspects of previous presentations as we went through the week. But I look at some of the work like today, as we heard from Sean, and some of the financial perspectives and opportunities. When we look at a lot of the challenges faced by our families, either directly or indirectly, finance is going to be a part of the challenge. We see that throughout various aspects of the family readiness system. Military One Source, the non-medical counseling opportunities that our service members and family members have. Quite often, when the folks are able to drill down to those underlying challenges, they do have a financial aspect. And I really thought that it was great that we had Sean on today. Gosh, I wish we could have spent a lot more time with him because it seemed like he had so much more to share with us. But you look at that, but then it's from a system perspective. Having Kristen 2 times, and the different what she talked about, the tools that she provided today. Her calls to action of finding those 2 things that you can do. I think that really resonated with me. Sometimes we, you turn around and you look at your whiteboard on the wall or all your sticky notes and you think, oh my God, where am I going to start? What if you only had to start with two? And I guarantee that when you accomplish those two, there's going to be two more to take their place. But I'm really interested in how, at my level, and even at the boots on the ground, the folks that are working directly with our families, how can we focus in on those two um, opportunities, those two needs, and do those to the best of our ability? I think that's something that I took away from today's session.
Thanks, Eddie. I really want to invite everyone who's on right now to share your takeaways. What connections are you making between the sessions and throughout the conference? Maybe what are some of those things that you're looking to do as a result as you take these what you learned this week forward and turn that into action? I've been thinking about, going back to what Sean said, Eddie, I think really was a great representation of sort of at least how I think of the family readiness system, as Sean talked about how there are other things when we're talking about finance issues that might need to be addressed first. He talked about accessibility and health, skills and education and shelter, and some of the things that, can move people forward without starting to talk about budgets and some of the personal finance things. And to me, that really speaks to sort of the different disciplines that we have inside of with our military family service providers and inside the whole family readiness system, and how they can work together to affect change in different areas.
Yeah, that's the gist of this entire event this week is how can we work together? You've heard me say it a few times throughout the week. How can we ensure that, I think it's an old cliche now, but how can we ensure that there truly is no wrong door? And I look at Jerry's comment up there, and, one of the things, and I'll give you a little call to action, and I'll talk more about it as we wrap up. But as we're talking here for the next couple of minutes, for those of you that are out there listening, write down the names of 5 individuals that you work with in this vast family readiness system that should have been on the engaging with us this week, but they weren't. So these might be external partners. These might be somebody that shares the other side of the cubicle with you. But we know that we have a system of tens of thousands of service providers. And so a little exercise, write down 5 names as we're talking. We'll get back to this. Bob, don't let me forget as we wrap up. But it really is about communicating, of strategizing, of, I love Kristen's analogy. I'd never seen this, but I'm going to steal it if she hasn't copyrighted it. But this idea of network weavers. And when you think about it, man, that's really what we all are. Excuse me. It's not necessary that we have to have all the answers. And believe me, as the guy that has the oversight for this system, I don't have all the answers. There's no way. And I'm a user of the system. But it's my role to ensure that we have empowered the network weavers to be able to make sure that there is that net, if you will, that no matter where a family falls, that net's going to be there to catch them. And we've got to identify where the holes are in that net. And that means we may have to patch it at times because there are going to be holes. The more you use a net, the more things fall through. And we have to be very conscientious of that and really work to ensure that we don't have gaps and that our families and our service members are not falling through the cracks and the tears in this net. So I think that I just love that network weaver concept.
Yeah, another thing that I think kind of flowed through the conference that I've been thinking about a lot this week is just intentionality. You take something like Sonny Brown's presentation, something that we do maybe without thinking, of doodling on the paper and making that intentional in terms of capturing information. And the same with what Kristen shared and what Russ shared in terms of relationships and working together and things like that, and really being attentive and intentional in how we're doing that and how we're setting ourselves up to build relationships and prepare ourselves to collaborate. I really think that's another kind of thread that ran through, and something that I'm going to take away is how can I be more intentional in these things.
Yeah, and Jerry again mentioned up there that concept of the hive, and we all should, and if we don't, we have to build our hives of support, and those hives look different depending on what your needs are. I've had the privilege of working within the system now for nearly 30 years, and believe me, when a situation or a challenge arises, I've got an amazing team that sit with me here at OSD, but I've got a team of thousands of providers out there in the field. And there's a lot of times that I will reach out to somebody that I've worked with over time and say, how are you fixing this, at Fort Huachuca? What are you doing at Camp Zama? How is this working out at Ramstein? And I use that as a way to judge, is this a challenge in other places? What are some of the best practices that are out there? But that's how I use my hive. And I've got a vast hive. But again, I think the success is a combination of reaching outside the door of my office to the team that I've got here, and then also, getting back down to the boots on the ground, because I know that our folks that are out there in the field look at some of the things that we put out, and they think, man, these guys are really not connected to the system, and that's something that we have to, from a policy, from a leadership perspective, we do have to maintain that connection. It is so vital to being able to support everything that you guys are doing.
Eddie, on the first day, Kristen had posed the question about sort of envisioning your network 3 years from now, and you and I talked about it in the first Making Connections session as it applied to the family readiness system. I'm just wondering for our attendees, if that has changed between Tuesday and today, or if any of the sessions have sort of changed how you're thinking of the family readiness system, or how you might envision it down the road. Were there changes in your thinking about how you see the FRS, Eddie?
I don't think from a global perspective there's not a lot of changes, but I think where the change in the trying to think of new ideas and new ways of accomplishing this very important work, you do get led down other paths, and for me, it's the idea of how do we, from a policy perspective, with a little bit of sticking our fingers in the programmatic perspective, how are we able to create a better connection between our different communities that are out there? And believe me, everybody gets siloed. We get siloed in our office, and we quite often lose perspective of what's happening right across the hall. So, I'm very interested in what we can do to create more partnerships and more of an understanding what each of us brings to the table at each level. I think sometimes we at the policy level are, we see a lot. We hear about all of the very visible challenges. And I want to find better ways of sharing what we see, because in addition to the challenges we see at this level, we also see amazing solutions. And those solutions are being provided by everybody that's on this week. You're doing great things. So how can we share that? We talked a little bit about that idea of the micro learning and real life examples and those types of things. That for me is really one of my biggest takeaways, is how can we share in very easily digestible pieces all the great work that's being done out there, and create a much more firm foundation for this web that all of us are weaving.
Well, we want to invite our attendees to share what connections you're making, and I want to acknowledge some of what's going on in the chat as well. Barb is talking about learning the term othering from Sean, this idea of sort of viewing people we're working with as other and not sharing that experience with them. So that's awesome, Barb. Glad to see that. Bridget has mentioned that building on this concept of knowing and knitting, she's been wondering what this looks like from a local leadership perspective. Seems that if as leadership openly supports these concepts, it'll get that much easier for providers to prioritize and execute on the ground. How are you thinking about that, Eddie? Because obviously there's leadership from your level and from the Office of Secretary of Defense, but there's lots of leaders on those local levels as well.
Yeah, I think on many occasions we would probably all nod our heads and agree that there may be too many leaders. We have a very bureaucratic system, and it can be very challenging to break down barriers that are that have been in place for a long time. The mentality of, well, this is how we've always done it. This is how I've always done it. Can present huge challenges for every one of us. Um, I see quite regularly examples where, providers that have been doing this for a long time. Well, I don't need to partner because I've been doing I'm the expert. And what we have to do is break down those barriers, and it has to be done from two directions. There's definitely opportunities from a policy perspective, but when we write policy, it has to be so overarching and so broad. It's really left to the services and then down to the installations to execute and operationalize that policy. That's why it's just as important that we get individuals like all of those that were here this week. And, it comes back to that exercise I have you doing. On average, I would say we probably had about 150 people per session, maybe a few more in some cases, a few less here on the Zoom platform, some more in YouTube, and some more interacting in other ways. But those that have been with us this week, you are the impetus for making change at the lowest level. We hear our service chiefs and our secretaries in the different branches talking about, taking a level of risk and, trying to do things a new way. And, I would guess that if you're here, you're willing to take those risks. You never put yourself in jeopardy, but, sometimes some low level risks can yield huge dividends. And, I encourage you to look for those opportunities to challenge the status quo, to sit down and talk with your leaders and identify those challenges that exist, whether it's getting people to attend, being given the platform to provide outreach at the local level. Get creative, figure out some ways that you try some new things, figure out ways to connect to those families, to those service members, and convince your leaders that it's important. And it goes back to a lot of what I talked about in the very opening on Tuesday of use the language that your leaders are utilizing. And in most cases at the installation level, we're talking our military leaders, but use that language about mission readiness, about retention, about lethality, things that we normally don't utilize when we talk about our programs, and show them what the opportunities and options are. Use that analogy I used about, leading to lethality of our forces or leading to lethal consequences. You can use that and you can utilize it to be very specific to the environment that you find yourself working in. And I found that very successful when I speak. Let's say, last year I had the opportunity to speak at AUSA, and every one of my comments were directly about soldiers. And then, later on, I had the opportunity to speak at a large group of leaders within the Air Force, and I used everything was exactly the same except I changed it to the environment, and it wasn't about soldiers; it was about airmen. Knowing your environment, knowing what the hot buttons are within your installations and your organizations, that's going to lead you to great opportunities to be able to impart that change and get your leaders thinking about things from a different way.
Thanks, Eddie, for that. Again, I'm going to call out to our attendees to share any connections that you're making or takeaways that you had from this incredible week of learning. But I'm gonna go back to you, Eddie, with our list of 5 people. So you had us, you set us on task, and I think everybody hopefully has your 5 people written down.
Great. And so here's what I want you to do is we wrap up the day, and just a few minutes left and wrap up this week. Hopefully you've identified some folks that you feel should have been here. So when this is all wrapped up, and you need to do it today. If you leave it for tomorrow, it's not going to happen. Frankly, if you leave it till half an hour after we wrap up, it's probably not going to happen. But put them on a group email, send them a note, tell them what you learned this week, tell them about some of the different sessions, the different speakers, some of the concepts, but narrow it down to two concepts. Let's use Kristen's example. Two things that you would like to see accomplished, and ask them to be a part of this thoughtful effort to increase our relationships within the family readiness system, and tell them why it's important. That's what I ask. Let's get some more people engaged. Let's point them to the recordings of this that we have out there, that you can push to your colleagues. But if you can get 5 individuals that are going to be more engaged, and let's say, I don't know how many people are on here right now, but let's say there's 80 people on here, that's 400 people. That right there in those emails are going to reach more people than any of our individual sessions did this week. So the power really lies in your hands, and the opportunity lies in your hands. So I've got my 5 people written down, and I hope that you'll send an email to your 5, tell them what they missed, and ask them to be part of this thoughtful process.
So who are you sharing with? What do you plan to share? There's a few more comments I want to acknowledge in the chat. Chris is saying he's really appreciated the wrap up. Lessons learned are broadly applicable. Have already been talking to some of my students about lessons learned. That's great to hear, Chris. So we're getting those messages expanded out there as well. Please share your questions for Eddie or any other connections that you're making throughout the session. And as we get close to wrapping up here, Eddie, do you have final thoughts? How do you see this going forward? How do we build on what we have? We've already talked about sort of expanding through our 5 people, but what's your vision for how this moves forward?
It's got to be to keep the conversation going, to seek out those opportunities. It's exciting when we get any helping professional engaged. I've been able to work within this system from a lot of different perspectives. And don't forget that I'm also a user of the perspective as a military spouse myself, or a user of the system. And, I talked about it a little bit in the opening earlier this week. It has made my life as a military family member, and good Lord, 49 years and a few months, every day of my life has been connected to the military, either as a military child or working for the military in one perspective or another. So, I wouldn't be here, and my family wouldn't be where they're at without this system to take care of us. And we see amazing examples of that all the time. So, continue to carry the message. And what I would want to wrap up with as we get ready is just a huge thanks to everybody that has worked together to put this on. A lot of people tell me that, it's so easy to do things virtually. Well, anybody that works behind the scenes on an event like this, of coordinating times and platforms, and when one of the speakers that speaks on a daily basis gets their slides to you about 12 hours before the session starts, i.e. me, it doesn't make things any easier. So all of our partners out in the services that help to lead the different concentration areas of the Military Families Learning Network, our extension partners, and as an individual that had 7 years of working within cooperative extension, you don't know how much the work that you do across the board results in better opportunities for our families. All of our panelists, to a person, our panelists were amazing. Our speakers, our presenters, to the entire Military Families Learning Network. This is a great event, and we're very proud to be able to offer this type of professional development to service providers around the world. And of course, to Vicki LaFollette, who is my lead on my team for the Military Families Learning Network. Appreciate everything that she has done to make sure that this works.
Thanks, Eddie, and I want to extend a thanks back to you for how generous you've been with your time and your thoughts, both presenting and joining us for the Making Connection sessions. It's really been a lot of fun, and I appreciate it. Well, we have a couple things that we want to share as we wrap up here. I also want to extend our thanks to everybody who participated and everybody who's on the call right now and on YouTube Live. What an awesome conference, and it's because of you, because of all the interaction that we've had. It's really enriched the experience for everyone, so thank you so much. We are offering a certificate of completion for your participation in this session. For instructions, you can see the link on the screen, militaryfamilieslearningnetwork.org, VC2019/credits. If this is your last session, and guess what? It is, you made it. I've been saying if this is your last session for 3 days, this is it. So this is your last session. So then we need you to go provide your feedback using our conference evaluation. You'll find that evaluation link on the same page as the continuing education credit and certificate of completion information. Evaluation can only be taken once. I probably don't need to repeat that because just take it. Take it right now, and we would really appreciate that. A couple other things to share with you. If you're new to the Military Families Learning Network, we provide a lot of content and educational material. There's 7 webinars coming up in October, 7, just in October. Podcasts and blog posts on demand. You can find it all at militaryfamilieslearningnetwork.org. Thank you to our tech team and our whole MFLN team who put this event together. And thanks to all of you who have tuned in. We appreciate you, and we hope to see you back here in 2020 for the next Military Families Learning Network virtual conference.